Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my channel is Discerning What Is True. I'm going to be reading a piece by Gerald Massey in his works called The Bible is Not Holy. And what I'm going to be reading is part 3 here, which will be probably the last part of the book I'm sharing with you. And so it's going to be a pretty short, not a short video, but it'll be shorter than normal. So I'm going to read this particular book to you guys. The day is the 29th day of February 2024. And tomorrow's the first day of March. Hermes says, that is, quote, there can be no religion more true or just than to know the things that are, end quote. We have had a religion without knowledge, and the coming religion must be founded on knowledge, and it must be good for the world, this world, I said, as it warranted for being good for any other. In knowledge only can we find a common ground of agreement. That which is based upon knowledge need not be the subject of everlasting diversity and contention among innumerable, that is, sects. We need a first-hand acquaintanceship with the fact of nature, not limiting nature, however, to the little we may know of it as present. Of course, mere facts are not everything. No numbers of separate vertical joints will supply a man with a backbone. We have to collect the various joints in our scattered facts derived from a closer acquaintanceship with and truer interpretation of nature. But life alone can produce the unity and cohesion that will constitute a backbone. Amongst these facts, we naturally assign a foremost place to those of spiritualistic phenomena, which the Orthodox as good as prohibited to their followers in favor of theoretical teachings, whereas we need a first-hand acquaintanceship here, if anywhere. Present facts are worth all the teachings of the past. By means of these, we can test them. The fact in nature are the sole ground to go upon for another life, just as they are for this. Facts that are scientific because they are verifiable today as in the past. We claim that the inner vision or second sight is a fact in nature. Prevision is a fact in nature. The spiritual apparition is and always has been a fact in nature. But a physical resurrection from the dead is not a fact of nature, in nature. And here the Aborigines are far ahead of the Orthodox Christian world in a practical knowledge of these phenomena on which the demonstrations of our continuality is based. The naturalist Kircher, Kircher, estimated the number of intellectual proofs of the existence of God at 61. A spiritualist considers one actual proof of objective spiritual manifestation as worth them all. Better is one real spirit communication than a divinity put together in 61 pieces. It is a fact that for the first time makes those figures live, or gives a foothold for taking the first step in the unknown. As evidence of a future life, one single proof is spiritual manifestation is worth the hearsay revelation of the world. The time has not yet come for any thinker to set forth the reign of law and order in their obscure domain of nature, which for lack of another name we call, quote, spiritual or neo-natural. But spiritualism is none the less real because Orthodox physical science has not yet established it as one of the truths. A significant number of competent observers and credible witnesses testify to the occurrence and reoccurrence of certain phenomenon manifestations, which go to prove that we have found the soul, S-O-L-E, bridge in nature that crosses the unfathomable gulf between the dead and the non-dead, the organic and the inorganic, between mind and matter, which science has stringently sought elsewhere, but never yet found. A million of us know that the cable is laid between the two worlds, and the message proves that there are intelligent operators at the other end of it who can send us messages in human language. We know that the so-called dead are living still, however difficult it may be, and is, though not impossible, to establish their personal identity. We know they can communicate with us and we with them, objectively as well as subjectively, and that the Objective phenomenon enables us to comprehend the true nature of the subjective, to accept and to found upon its inferiority. We know they can establish a rapport with us more rare and potent than we can with each other in the body. Some of us have felt and handled and heard that which was invisible to our spirit. In the presence of those who could see and describe the forms and emotions of that, or of those which we only felt and heard, and so we can put our evidence together and draw the necessary inference. Buckle has said, quote, the doctrine of immortality is the doctrine of doctrines, the truth compared with which it is indifferent whether anything else be true. Anything spiritualism alone offers the means of establishing it as a fact. Spiritualism alone offers a scientific basis for a doctrine of immortality. The phenomenal spiritualists stand level-footed on the only ground of fact that is, ever has been, offered by nature for human foothold in the unseen. Spiritualism alone reveals a bridge on which we can get in bit of actual foothold for crossing the gulf of death. The spiritualist makes connection between the two worlds and runs his trains of thought right through. Indeed, the two worlds are but one for him. They are not two, any more than the railroad runs through another world by night, I should say. It is but one world, after all, with two aspects. The daylight part of it is but half revealed by day, and the dark side is but half concealed by night. The phenomenon called spiritualistic furnishes us with a means of interrogating nature in such a way that it is sure to revolutionize all our mental science, that is, our psychology, philosophy, metaphysics, and theosophical. These phenomena shows us that we have other and profound facts to go upon than those hitherto included in our data. Realistic phenomena, not merely idealistic, facts in place of fate. Spiritualism opens up to our vision a power that operates upon us and through us and makes use of us whether we will or not. Whether we are conscious of its presence or not, our recognition being unnecessary to its existence or operations. Spiritualism shows us how the soul of man may be fed with a substance drawn from the well of life within us that is penetrated and replenished from eternal springs. And we maintain that these phenomena called spiritualistic, which have no relations to the miracles of misinterpreted mythology, and these alone do actually demonstrate the natural nexus for the continuality of life and the next step upward in human evolution. Some of our free thought secularist friends seem to suffer from rabies on the subject of a future existence. The very idea of it drives them fanatic, and that which is at the water of life to others only serves to aggravate their symptoms and make them rage more furiously. The editor of the Melbourne Liberator says it is a swindle of the worst description to keep up the farce of a future life. Now, I think we know that there are facts in nature which warrant the inference of another life, and simply as facts, I would have them make known. Without the facts, we cannot know the truth. Anyway, there is no warrant for those who do not know the man has a soul to dogmatically and teach that men have no souls, or that there is no future life. Those who do not know can have no right to pretend to know, and such pretensions of the negation dogmaticis constitute a positive imposture. Whoever owns the head, you cannot quite bring a knowledge of all things pertaining to the ultimate reality under one hat. The agnostic shows more modesty. Professor Huxley says, quote, agnosticism means that a man shall not say he knows or believes that which he has no scientific grounds for professing to know and believe, end quote. So say we. Only we claim to have scientific grounds for knowing. A crude materialistic interpretation of the universe bottoms nothing. There is eternal motion. There is eternal life. There is a being beyond appearance. There is a consciousness that coordinates the means to attain the ends, with power to turn to account all that occurs in the sphere of so-called human free will. There is intelligence involved in all that is intelligible. All who break the laws of nature do so under penalty of punishment. They learn sooner or later that there is a lawmaker whose minister and agencies will dog the lawbreaker. However, we may deny the lawmaker, we cannot evade the law. False spiritualism merely begets a craze after another life. But a true spiritualism will turn our attention to this life and help all the work of this world. Spiritualism enables us to call in the new world in our rectification and adjustment of the wrong done in the old, somewhat like calling in troops from a new world of the colonies to fight the battle of England in the old. It has come to quicken a keener conscience in the human race, set up a loftier idea of life and a nobler standard of appeal than fear of punishment and hope of reward. For me, spiritualism means an aid in the certain overthrow of all false dogmas and lying legends which have been imposed upon men and are still imposed upon the children in the name of God. Science has been driving in its splitting wedge with a mighty ripping and renting of the ancient beliefs. But with spiritualism, the wedge is alive and takes root just as the seed of Indian bow tree is so vital that when it is sown singly in the cleft of some lofty tower or fortress, and a drop of moisture and smile of sunshine have caused it to quicken. It will shoot out and lay hold of the stone with its feelers and strike root to make it way down the walls to the earth outside. And laying hold of this, it gathers strength and grows mightily, and sends back such force to its birthplace that the walls are rent, and the temporary resting place betwixt earth and heaven is shattered in favor of the newer rootage and firmer foothold upon the more nutritious and life-giving ground. So will spiritualism lay hold of the larger substance of reality and inevitably rent the barren stone walls of the establishment into fragments, minute enough to be ground down into the new fresh soil in which it is destined to flourish and bear fruit in the freer, larger, loftier life of a nobler human race. Spiritualism will help to break up the sacerdotal ring of priestcraft that has hamped the people around with terrors and stranglers' souls with fear. It is rapidly abolishing the tyranny of death and restoring freedom for life to those whose whole living had been turned into one long dread of death. Spiritualism will have done a great work, if only by destroying that craven dread of dying which has been instilled into us from before birth. The child in the embryo having been made to feel and embody the mother's shuddering at the frightful language used by their torturers of souls, who fumigate their cruel formulas from the pulpit. If it sets us free to do our own thinking as rational men and women who have so long and so profoundly suffered from the pretensions of the sacerdotes, who continue to peddle in the name of God a system of delusion, the foundations of which are to be discovered at last in misinterpreted mythology, against which system of false teaching I, for one, am at war to the death with any and every weapon I can lay hands on, including this most potent weapon, the sword of spiritualism. Spiritualism is sure to be terribly iconoclastic. It means a new light of revelation in the world from the old eternal source, and you cannot have new light let in without seeing many old acquaintances with a new face. Many aspects of things will change, and some things that we mistook for live faces will turn into the sheerest mask of mockery and whiten with the sweat of dissolution running down them. Spiritualism, as I interpret it, means a new life in the world, and new life is not brought forth without pain and parting and the shedding of old decay. New ideas are not born in the mind without the pains of perturbation, and to get rid of old ingrained errors of false teaching is like having to tear up the root, not the snags of one's own teeth with our own hand, but by our own hand and will this lies to be done. For nothing else can do it. New light and new life, however, do not come to impoverishly. They come to enrich, and no harm can befall the nature of that which is eternally true. It is only falsehood that fears our needs to fear the transfiguring touch of light that most needs shrink and shrink until it shrivels away. Spiritualism will prove a mighty iconoclast, but the fetish and idols it destroys will yield up their concealed treasures of innermost truth, as did the statue that was destroyed by Muhammad, the image breaker. The priestly defenders offer him a erroneous sum to spare their God, but he resisted the bribe and smote mightily with his iron mace. Down fell the image, and it broke there, rolled out of the river of pent-up wealth, which had been hoarded and hidden within. Evolution, for which no place has been left in the Christian system of thought, is of itself quite capable of being the death of that system. But spiritualism will undermine it and dig its grave and plant it with another nobler life. Spiritualism has already proven itself to be the greatest solvent or ancient dogma ever known. It has acted and is acting like Hannibal's vinegar on the Alps by crumbling the most stupendous obstacles of mental progress. The spiritualist religion is going to conquer because it is not afraid of any new facts that may be dug out of the earth or drawn down from the heavens. It is bound to conquer because with his free thinking is no longer on the side of negation. Our old freethinkers were brave men who drew a new breath of freer life through the enlarging lungs of the world by daring to think freely. Braver men than our spiritualists are, who are sadly in need of a fiery course of persecution and test to the mettle of their manhood. But in the old material plane, they soon came to where their foothold ceased, and they could get no further. The freer thought of the spiritualist gives him arms to swim the sea and wings to mount the air. When he comes to where the earth ends, and to the materialists there seem no more solid ground, I have warrant for saying that the only form of free thought that is feared is a deadly by the Church of Rome in spiritualism. Hold on a second. Which cuts the ground from under its relation to a future life. We say to them, call it a superstition if you please. Our superstition will be the death of yours. And whenever or wherever they come fairer to the grapple, we shall see, and our enemies will feel how the old bones will crackle and crumble to the grips of its crushing power. Spiritualism, as I apprehend it, is going to be a mightier agent in carrying on the work of this world, in producing loftier souls for the life of another world, which it gives us glimpses on the way. Let me tell you that this despised spiritualism will put a light into the one hand and a sword in the other. They have to be flashed into many dark places and through many a dungeon graving of humankind, in spite of the birds of night that may hoot at the light and blaspheme against its brilliance. There is a cry of womanhood now going up in search of God, sometimes accompanied with a claps of hands, at other times with a clenched fist, and it behooves all men to know what it does really and rightly mean. It may be found to imply more than, quote, woman suffrage, end quote. It may signify woman suffering, quote, suffering from what, end quote, do you reply? Quote, do we not keep her and clothe her, and are we not prohibited, or we're under the good old English law, from beating her with a stick that is thicker than your middle finger, end quote. It may be that the brute idea of the savage is getting to be a worn out type here as elsewhere, and that there is a desire for a more refined and intellectual form of manhood in the intimacy of married life, so far from woman having been the cause of any pretended fall of man. She has been the true savior of humanity, or rather the main instrument for saving, because more open to the divine influence, which I hold to be for ever working to prevent the propagation of man's worser moods and the personification of his baser self. Often has she tried to hinder man when he was devilishly bent on defacing the coming image of the divine, and this alone with her back to the wall in places where there was no law on her side. How many idiots, think you are born into the world through drunken fathers. Idiocracy is a arrested development. Drunkenness is also arrest of the soul and its brain action, which means that the idle child is often a tiny, pitiful image of the father who was in the state of moral idiocracy. The spiritual life was arrested, and there is a great deficiency of soul, as there is of blood in the brain when you swoon. It is a moral swoon made visible and permanently in a hidden efficacy of death and life. Luckily, if the paralyzed be so complete that a great criminal is not left loose on the world and active, instead of helpless idiocracy. I only dare him, I only dare hint at the things which are done in the world to the knowledge of women, and you need not wonder if now and again there rises the shrill protesting shriek. Some of my readers may have seen specimens in Greek and Italian art of what man has done to gratify the lust of the eye, that he might perpetrate the lust of the soul, and gloat over his own moral deformity, immortalized by the utmost cunning wherewith an art could animate the most precious forms of inanimate nature. He has set the image of his own corruption in the shining mirror of a stainless jewel, and a figure for his moral deformity in the lustre of a gem. Think of the giving the worst kind of human disease to a gem. He has cut the devil of his beastly self in the diamond, enshrined the libidinous satyr, tongue lofting and glittering from a sapphire azure heaven made the innocent made the innocent emery flash the place with a reflection of what was enacted in its great green coolness, called up spirits of all uncleanness in the purity of a crystal. All this was very bad, very horrible, this corruption of art for the delectation of the beast with a taste in man. But what was such degradation as its wanderingness, and worse compared with that of a drunken man, no matter with which passion he may aflame, fiercely stamping his own hideous face and the features of his vice on that form of humanity which he is so darkened and defiles as to well nigh blast or blot out of the image of God or man altogether. These jewels of life, these creations of love, to be thus brutally defaced in such a cruel way. It is horrible, most horrible, enough to make all womankind, all motherhood, nay, all manhood, rise and revolt against it, and sicken, and spew it out. If men go reeling to the marriage bed, reckoning with the foul, the effluvium of drink, gross with gluttony, and stained through and through with moral disease, if the children are made from the scum of bad blood into an outer likeness of the inner corruption, what can we expect the men and women to be? If you held a tiny little bird's if you held a tiny little bird's egg in your hand, how tenderly would you touch it? How protectively would you fence it round and shield it from all danger? And here it is, an immortal soul in the emerald, susceptible to every influence of the father, every feeling of the mother, looking with all its life to them for environing conditions. Here then, instead of the ancient damnation of the flesh, we need a religion of the body as well as of the soul, and a gospel of human physics. Hitherto, the utmost has been aimed at the scientific has been a better breed of horses or cattle. We ought to be at least careful to the bringing forth of human beings. Make the tree good, and its fruit will be good. In brackets here, barring certain quote throwbacks or sports of nature in bracket. The work has to be done from the root and not by late trying to graft the good on a bad stock. Remember that life comes into the world according to conditions, and the first of these conditions are those of the married life. Human embryology has now to be studied religiously in the light of evolution. If I were a woman, I doubt whether I should consider a smoker or a chewer or of tobacco quite good enough to father my children. The final effect, the supposed beneficiary effect of nicotine, is to arrest the decay of matter that ought to be sloughed off in order that it may be renewed. No smoker is so So no smoker is so live or live a man all around as he ought to be or might be. And you can study them in all the various stages and degrees of dreaming, decaying, dying, poisoning the springs of future life, or bringing death into the world. The truth is that woman at her best and noblest must be monarchs of the marriage bed. We must begin in the concretatory if we are to benefit the race, and the woman has got to rescue and take possession of herself and consciously assume all the responsibilities of maternity on behalf of the children. No woman has any right to part with the absolute ownership of her own body, but she has the right to be protected against all forms of brutal force. No woman has any business to marry anything that is less than a man. No woman has any right to marry any man who will sow the seeds of hereditary disease in her darlings, not for all the money in the world. No woman has any right, according to the highest law, to bear a child to a man she does not love. No mother has any right to allow her innocent little ones to be injured mentally for life by orthodox drugs and false notions of salvation that are rendered from the pulpit by pious impostors. These and other things as vital will become practically so soon as womankind cooperate and insist that they shall be practiced. Quote, women obey your husbands, end quote, is a text that when wrongly applied has wrought as much human misery as that of the other relic of barbarism. Quote, spare the rod and spoil the child, end quote. Why? The great and sole incentive with the mass of male hypocrites who support the churches is because Orthodox Christianity encourages the subjection of women and helps to make them better, that is, more spiritless, household slaves. They do not believe for themselves, but they think them anything good enough for their wives and daughters to believe. Quote, you cannot serve two masters, saith the word. But Satan nudges them and whispers, gammon, end quote. Another quote here, you lend your wives and daughters to the Lord. You give yourselves to love and worship Mammon, end quote. Our women and children are bound to break away from the system of fettered thought. If I could stand where stood the cock when all the world could have hear him crow, my cry would be to the wives and mothers on behalf of the children. Women are bound to rescue the children and to head their exodus from the bondage of orthodoxy, even if the men are too unmanly, too cowardly to help them. No doubt, one real crux is, what are we going to teach the children? And here there is so much to be done and lived by the parents in presence of the children, and so little to be said. The life we live with them every day is the teaching that tells and not the precepts. Utterly wickedly, they are continually beguiled by our own daily practices. Give the children a knowledge of natural law, especially in their domain of physical nature, which has hitherto been taboo. If we break a natural law, we suffer pain and consequence, no matter whether we knew the law or not. The result is not an accident because it always happens and is obviously intended to happen. Punishments are not to be avoided by ignorance of effects. They can only be warded off by a knowledge of causes. Therefore, nothing but knowledge can help them. Teach the children to become the soldiers of duty instead of the slaves of the selfish desire. Show them how the sins against self reappear in the lives of others. Teach them to think of those others as the means of getting out of self. Teach them how the laws of nature work by heredity. How often has the pious, God-fearing parent produced a child that seems to the outside world the very opposite of himself, as if the devil had dropped the egg in the good man's nest. And yet this Satan of a son was but the nature of the saintly father turned inside out, only in exposure of that which has been hidden for a time beneath the cloak of hypocrisy. Because in the end, nature is honest and will out with it. Children have ears like the very spies of nature itself, eyes that penetrate all subterfuge and pretense, and a sense of justice that it allowed fair play. Would straightway wreck the orthodox gospel. Guide the curiosity of the little ones, which while it is yet innocent, and give them all necessity, knowledge afresh and sweet from the lips of the mother and the father. Mr. Ruskin, notwithstanding, let the children be well grounded in the doctrine of development, without which we cannot begin to think coherently. Give them the best material, the soundest method, let the spirit world have a chance as a living influence on them, and then let them do the rest. Never forget that the faculty for seeing is worth all that is to be seen. It is good to set before the youngsters the loftiest and noblest ideas, and those that are mythical and non natural, but those that have been lived in human reality. The best ideas of all has to be portrayed by the parents in the reality of life at home. The teaching that goes deepest will be indirect, and the truth will tell most of them when it is overheard, when you are not watching and the children are. That is when the lesson are learned for life. Positively, my coming religion may suggest a coming revolution. I should not wonder if it does. Anyway, we mean to do our own thinking and to have absolute freedom of thought and expression. We mean to rescue our Sunday from the senatorial ring, but we do not mean that the day of rest and recreation shall fall into the hands of the capitalists. We mean to try and rescue this world from the clutches of those who profess to have the keys and the keeping of the other, they who hold up the other world in front of us, that the beasts of burden, the producer as a decrying lure, like the bunch of carrots before the donkey's nose, in order that the suggestion of plenty in paradise may induce him to forego his common right in grazing ground on earth. We mean to have a day of reckoning with the unjust stewards of the earth. We mean to have the natural property restored to the people, which the churches and other bodies have withheld from the people. We mean that the land, with its unalienable right of living, is mineral wealth below the soil and its waters above, shall be open to all. We mean to have our banking done by the state and our railways work for the benefit of the whole people. We mean to temper the terror of rampant individualism with the principles of cooperation. We mean to show that the wages system is a relic of barbarism as social serfdom, that under labor must remain a slave in the prison house of property. We mean for woman to have perfect equality with man, social, religious, and political, and her fair share in that equity which is of no sex. We mean also that the same standard of morality shall apply to the woman as to the man. In short, we intend that the redress of wrongs and the righting of inequalities which can only be rectified in this world shall not be put off and postponed to any future stage of existence. The religion of the future has got to include not only spiritualism, but the salvation of humanity for this life. Any other may be left to follow hereafter. It has to be a sincerity of life in place of pretended belief, a religion of science in place of superstition, of joy instead of sorrow, of man's ascent instead of his fall, a religion of fact in the present and not a mere faith for the future, a religion in which the temple reared to God will be in human form instead of being built of brick of stone, a religion of work rather than worship, and in the place of deadly creeds when all their hungry parasites of prey, a religion of life, life actual, life here, life now, as well as a promise of life everlasting. That is the conclusion here of the work by Gerald Massey, which is simply called "The Bible is Not Holy." And this is the part 3 of this video tonight. And so I hope that you enjoyed this, and I appreciate you being here and listening. And I wish you a good night, and you take care. Good night.